I'm Will, and this is a very bratty edition of Film East Chats. Hello and welcome to this episode of Film East Chats. I'm Will Schofield, a curator here at Film East, joined by my fellow team members Shelby Cook and Ishnor. To kick off this new season of the pod, we're bringing you 2 episodes dedicated to our newest zine, Brat, but it's literally not because it's just a bratty movie collection. Curated by myself and Shelby Cook, Brat, but it's literally not because it's just a bratty movie collection, is a zine that features 18 film and TV shows paired with each song from Charli XCX's revolutionary album. These works, unique in genres, styles and narratives, all embrace the ethos of Brat, creating a cinematic way to relive the pop cultural phenomenon. The 60-page programme includes expert analysis from the curators explaining each selection and how the works fall into the Brattosphere. In the first 2 episodes of Season 6, we're going to bring you a discussion on 2 films we curated in the collection, Sebastian Lelio's A Fantastic Woman and Brian De Palma's Carrie. Our Brat movie zine is available for purchase on our website and costs £1.99 or $2.50 for digital download. And guess what? For a limited time, you can purchase a stunning print copy of this collection. Get all 60 Brat green pages printed on satin finish paper for only £6.50 or $9 while supplies last. In this episode, we will be discussing Brian De Palma's Carrie, a film curated by myself and paired with track 3 from Brat, Sympathy is a Knife. The first on-screen adaptation of a Stephen King novel, Brian De Palma's Carrie depicts a viciously bullied pubescent teen who develops powerful telekinetic abilities. Trapped between the brutal torment of her peers and her abusively evangelical mother, the horror crescendos at the high school prom, which promises to be a bloodbath. When adapting King's work, De Palma made the interesting choice to move away from the chunky and pimply description of Carrie from the book, casting the slender and stunning Sissy Spacek in the role instead. This choice results in a shift of Carrie's characterization. A girl who, by all accounts, is smart, friendly and beautiful, and yet her life is still ruled by the ceaseless mockery and unmotivated cruelty of the people, specifically girls, around her. These ideas are paralleled in Sympathy is a Knife, in which Charli, the ever-confident diva of 360 and Von Dutch, finds her self-assurance obliterated under the weight of a girl who somehow taps the insecurities she barely knew she had. Perhaps the most brutal twist of the knife is in the shared conclusion reached by the 2 works. Ultimately, it is Sue's kindness towards Carrie that starts the domino chain and ignites the film's explosive final act. As Charli laments, it's not the cruelty of the other girl that hurts, it's her sympathy. Without further ado, enjoy our group discussion of Carrie. Hi everyone. We're back today. We're discussing Stephen King's classic horror novel Carrie in the form of a film. 2 films actually be discussing today. Brian De Palma's original 1976 version of Carrie, and the 2013 remake starring Chloe Grace Moretz. So I guess we'll start with the immortal filmies question. What do people think of the movie? Or was it their first time seeing it? Ishnor, you watched the 2013 version. I presume
Yes.
Shelby and I watched the 76.
None of us have seen the 2013 version.
No, so we'll be hearing a range of opinions today. It'll be very exciting.
My first opinion, when it literally opened, I watched the original, And I thought to myself, what in the porno is going on in this movie right now? I was like, okay, like, great. Am I watching a porno? Am I watching the right movie? Like, what is this? Um, no, obviously I had never seen it. It's such, an iconic film. Um, it's just one of those films I just never got around to watching. I'm not a big horror person. But of course you know of Carrie, you know of that scene. Um, I actually, I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me was the the prom scene and the I really loved that split screen that he did
Mm.
during like the chaos of the everything, going to shit. I thought that was really cool. Um, but otherwise, it kind of hit all the beats that I was expecting it to hit. I think Sissy Spec was like super or spatic. Is it how you say it?
I always thought it was SpaceX, but I've never
Basic.
checked.
Well, I thought she was like super creepy. Like I don't know how she got her eyes that big. I didn't realize John Travolta was in it. The one girl, like the evil popular girl, like when she was giving John Travolta a blowjob, and the whole time she's just talking about Carrie, like what? Like it was just so bizarre. It was so weird. I had a good time watching it. So, Ishnor, what are your thoughts on on the remake?
I, I didn't so I watched the wrong film. So I
So, okay.
I mean I didn't like it that much. Okay, so I was just for me when I was watching it, I was not scared, so that was a good thing. But I sort of like whenever so whenever I'm watching something horror or whenever I'm watching something somebody's sort of reclaiming their agency or whatever, but like the clear intention of the prom scene of what happened, I understood that there was trauma there, which turned into an absolute chaos with the magical powers and everything that was happening. But then there was no clear intention to defy the authority, if that makes sense. Like, because in the 2013, what happens is like she gets her powers, but she doesn't have enough time to regulate those powers. So I don't know, like when that last scene happens, how that chaos happens and what is she thinking and why is she thinking that and what is happening. So for me, it was just not a very good experience watching the film. And that could come from the fact that I don't like horror and I was not enjoying it that
Well,
much.
I agree with that too with the original. They don't really like explain why she has these powers. I mean, it's just kind of like she just has them. And she like goes to that whole library scene where she's like looking at like, oh, other people can control things with their mind too. It's just very
Yeah,
uh it I mean, I've never read the book. I'm assuming the book has more of an explanation as to what her
yeah,
issue is.
I don't think
yeah.
so.
And
I
also,
think
Go ahead,
my
Will.
understanding is that, well, first of all, it's quite a Stephen King thing to be like, okay, it's normal world, and then there's weird stuff happening. There's a clown coming and he's eating people. There's a this, there's a that, there's a hotel that eats people. Um, but I think in the wider kind of um metaphor, I guess, of the film, I think it is to do with effectively well, kind of periods, to be honest, and the hormones and emotional and the frailty and the trauma that can come with that for a young girl, particularly someone like Carrie, who was never educated on it, never taught. And so it's kind of the idea that her powers develop when she first
Comes a
starts
woman.
becomes a woman. And it I guess it's kind of the idea is, what if this internal struggle, what if this internal emotional unbalance was made external, and what if these emotions that you're these harsh emotions that you're suddenly feeling that are impossible to control and that no one around you seems to understand, what if they what if they translated to broken light bulbs or throwing a chair across a room? And I mean, perhaps, I'm not a woman, I haven't experienced a period. I'm fairly
the
certain
worst.
Stephen King hasn't either. I don't know how accurate or how fair that assessment is. Um, but yeah, I feel like for me, the explanation of the psychic powers and stuff, it wasn't really it's not really important to the narrative that it's necessarily telling, which is more about Carrie and her struggles and her social life and her home life and the abuse she suffers. I love this film. It's at number 9 on Will's official list of his top 100 favorite horror movies
Oh,
that you
top
can see on
100.
letterboxd.com. Go follow Blobly. I haven't actually reached 100 yet, but I'll get there someday. I think I agree with Shelby in that it's not really that scary of a movie.
No.
Partly that's because it's quite dated, but a big aspect of that is, well, it's just not very scary. It's teenagers being mean to each other, and there's that one scene where, like, at the end where there's fire and there's some explosions and there's a fire hose that comes to life, but it's not going to have you hiding behind the sofa. I think the
Yeah.
film is a lot more effective as kind of a tragedy, like a teen tragedy. It's a story of this young girl who, God bless her, is trying her best. She comes from an incredibly abusive home.
Yeah.
And is just getting constantly harassed at school and just can't seem to catch a break. The teachers, they kind of reach out, but they don't really get it. And she's trying her best to stay nice and under the radar and not let herself be hurt. And then ultimately, despite everything that happens, it all comes crashing down around her and she lashes out. And I think that it's an incredibly fun scene, but also I can't help but I feel a lot of empathy for Carrie, and I think that kind of carries it in my estimation, perhaps inflating it a bit more than it should be. But I don't know. I'm a big fan.
And even in death, they're still terrorizing her. She can't even, they vandalized her cross on the burnt down house. People are still terrorizing her even in her death. No, I agree with you. I think, it is very much an exploration of, I mean, being a girl in high school is awful. Especially being a weird, shy, quiet girl, when you have all of these big, mean personalities around you. And sort of like that lashing out of, you know, this is what I this is what you want to do. You want to like lash out at these people and, you know, make them suffer for the way that they're making you suffer. And obviously we see that, that culminates in the prom scene and then even going home and the confrontation between Carrie and her mom. But I think there's also, some obviously there's religious elements that are played into it. I'm interested in your thoughts, Will, about how religion plays into this. If we see her, if we view her, which I agree, we view her psychic powers as this coming to womanhood. How you see the hyper religion of the mom playing into that, because I found it quite bizarre that I grew up. I went to church every Sunday. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a religious person, but I went to church every Sunday, and I never had it ever been positioned as womanhood is evil. When you get your period, you're the devil's day. So I just found that very bizarre that was the mom's perspective on that. It was like, you're now evil because you're a woman. I guess it's because she has that sex drive now. I'm not sure what I don't know how you would interpret that, Will, or Ishnor, whoever.
Yeah, I guess my assessment is that it was a very bizarre. The mother's a very bizarre character,
Yeah,
obviously.
she's
Um,
irrational.
I think, yeah, I think a lot of her trauma, a lot of it is her own trauma, tied up from the fact that she was clearly very strictly Christian, celibate, everything, and then one night, she ended up sleeping with Carrie's father. I can't remember whether they are concrete on whether it was a rape or not. But I think it's at the very least very heavily implied in the 76 version. And I think because of that, you could definitely see that as a route for her treatment of Carrie. She sees her as a stain on her life that she's now had to devote herself to, and in addition, she sees her as an abhorrent creature that goes against. It's a constant reminder that she failed to remain celibate.
Yeah.
That she did that this and from a religious perspective that she failed to remain celibate, and then from a trauma perspective about this event that happened to her, this horrific event that she clearly regrets and is still hit on. It still hits on her. And then Carrie goes one step further and begins developing psychic powers, much to her chagrin, which, if she wasn't certain before, then the idea of her being like a metaphorical demon to her becomes literal in that moment. Suddenly she's showing occultish powers and witchcraft. Carrie is a demon child. And I think it's really interesting that throughout the house there is a lot of imagery of the Christian Saint Sebastian, who was a Christian saint who was famously tied to a tree and shot full of arrows, is the famous imagery of him. And at the film's end, after the mother ends up being killed by Carrie, she is strung up and filled full of knives in a way that is nearly identical to Saint Sebastian, clearly reminiscent of that imagery. And I do find it very interesting that despite being the major antagonist of the film, she is presented in this saint-like manner at the end, whereas Carrie is, a demon child cowering, hiding in the corner. And I suppose that is a kind of something quite tongue-in-cheek about that, this idea of, the hero martyr is the horrible abusive mother, and the demon child is this poor little girl who just wants someone to be nice to her, effectively. And I suppose that is a kind of I don't know whether that comes from, I presume that comes from King, maybe De Palma put that in the edit. I again haven't read the book.
I think that's really interesting, because I didn't even consider that it was a rape that conceived Carrie, but now that you position it like that, it does make sense why she has so much animosity towards Carrie. Because when I was watching it, I just kind of, because my perspective of when I was watching it, the mom seemed to, she was regretful of that moment of when Carrie was conceived, but I still thought that it was like sort of a mutual thing, and that she was, now Carrie's going to be forever the stain of reminding her that she had sex out of wedlock. But yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I also feel like the religion, the fact of religion could also be tied into the fact, the need to control. And the day Carrie gets her period, the mother realizes that she is growing and she is going to grow, and thus her control over her daughter as to like whatever she asks her to wear or however she wants her to live is not going to be as much, because she's going to have her own agency. So the religion factor ties into the fact of loss of control as well, because in the 2013 film, there is a scene when she gets her period and she goes home. The mother says that you were not supposed to be showering with the other girls. And why did you do that? And she had never told the daughter about periods. So it comes as a shock to her. So I think that was just also in the nature of protecting her from anything that is going out in the world, and saving her, protecting her, or controlling her. That, for me, it seemed that is where the religion perspective came into being.
I absolutely agree. I think that's a really, really good point. And it's made me think about how in the 76 version, Carrie, before going to the prom, ends up standing up for herself to her mother and shouts her down and says, "No, I'm going. You can't stop me." And I think that's when she reveals her powers slightly.
Yeah.
And she goes to the prom, and then she comes back and everything horrible's happened. She's in tears, and the first thing the mother does is stab her, is attack her. And I think that raises a really interesting question of, did she do that attack because of the psychic powers and because she's this devil child stuff, or was it because Carrie had broken free of her control in that moment, that she realized she's no longer under her thumb, she can't exist anymore. And I guess that's kind of where I think the film toes the line between a kind of supernatural tale and what a kind of more realistic one of domestic abuse, in a quite an interesting way. One thing that is very different in both movies to the original book that has been commented on a lot over the years is the portrayal of Carrie as a character, and specifically her physicality. In the movie, she's played by Sissy Spacek, and the 2013 remake, I believe it's Chloe Grace Moretz. Two very, classically beautiful women who are playing characters who are playing a character who's a lot younger than them at the time of filming. In the book, Carrie was a lot more plain and quote unquote frumpy. She had acne and pimples and was chubbier and kind of greasier hair, and was generally described as kind of more typically, I guess, nerdy and unattractive, like a young girl probably would be. And I've seen a lot of people both praise and criticize this change, and I was wondering what your guys' opinions might be on that, if you had any.
It plays. It's hard to say because I can see how it plays into the story, because she is this traditionally beautiful girl, and that she should be, if she's portrayed as this beautiful girl like she is in the movie, she should be accepted more into this group of people, but it's just because she's weird. But it also, again, with, I'm just so optimistic about the world. It just continues to show that, like, that's just the Hollywood system, is they're not going to put ugly people on screen. Um, you know, well, I guess maybe not, because, there are, I, I don't know, because I think that if they would put an ugly person in the role of Carrie, but maybe not in 1976. I think more today they might do that to make her even more of an, antagonize her because she's ugly. I don't know. It's an interesting, and I remember when you were writing the curation notes for Brat for this film, Will, and I remember you mentioned that in your curation notes about that she's this very beautiful girl and she should be, accepted more because she is beautiful. And it did kind of spark that. And, I guess the original thought was, of course she's beautiful. It's a Hollywood movie. You got to she's the star of the movie. She can't be an ugly, dumpling child. That's just not the way Hollywood works. Everyone in movies are pretty. But I guess it does add to that, the sort of empathy that you have for Carrie, because you do feel bad for her, because she should, she should have everything, because she is pretty and she's just quiet and she's weird. I don't know. I just feel like I'm going around in circles. Ishner, do you have any thoughts?
I I understand the question. I understand everything, but then it's like she should have everything because she is a human at the end of the day. Like uh, beautiful or not beautiful, or acne or no acne. She should, and so this world, I just feel like this is really unfair for the people, or like it, like if she is not accepted because she looks a certain way, I feel that that's not great. If that, like, but like if, and she should be accepted because of who she is, but not how she looks. So I didn't give it
I
much thought as well.
To go off of that, I guess, oh God, what was the thought I just had in my head? It makes the mean girls more of an antagonist, because I guess they're picking on her because of her personality difference? I mean, does it, I guess the question is, does it make them more of an antagonist because they're picking on her for being weird versus being ugly? You know, if it's in the original story that they pick on her because she's ugly, is that worse than picking on her because of her personality? I mean, I have an answer for it, but
Yeah,
I
the
think
way
both are
I've
worse.
yeah, I think the way I've always thought about it is obviously both are horrific, and Film East says no to bullying.
yes.
That's official. But I think for me, I've always assumed that the change from the book is it's like Shelby says that when when she if she was portrayed as kind of more a more stereotypical victim of bullying,
Mm.
um and you were to see that, you would assume that the bully's ire is driven by her appearance, which is obvious, which is awful and terrible and worth chastising. But I feel like we as a viewer wouldn't look at it much further than that. We'd
Yeah.
say they're bullying teens, do what bullying teens do, just picking on uh the bigger girl. Um, Whereas by framing it in this way, where she is on paper, she's pretty and nice and quiet and smart and collected, and they seem to me, it kind of gave more of an impression that there's there's no escape for her, really.
Mm.
She's at home, she's being tortured by her mother. At school, she's being tortured by her peers. And from her perspective, there's no clear reason why necessarily. I suppose there's I guess by making it less obvious what she's being made fun of for, it I guess makes it seem a bit more inescapable from I suppose, but I don't know if that's but as Shelby points out, is also the real world factors in play, like wanting to hire a pretty well known actress like Sissy Spacek um and sell more tickets from a poster of her in a very skin tight revealing dress
Your
covered in
dress,
blood and
yeah.
stuff like that,
Hmm.
very sheer.
Yeah.
um
It
yeah
also, I think, to your point, Will, it makes a far more interesting story because we have seen, I mean, maybe not in 1976, but if we put it, in our cultural perspective, our zeitgeist, watching this movie, we have seen that so many times before of, the ugly girl, she's bullied in school, but she's gonna, the Princess Diary, she's gonna make herself pretty and now everyone loves her, because she's pretty and now she's not gonna be bullied anymore. Now she's the hero of the story because she's not ugly. We've seen that story before, so it does
Yeah.
bring, it does raise more questions of would it have been as impactful of a story if, I guess we understand more of why she's picked on because she's ugly versus why is she being picked on if, she's so pretty and she's the stereotypical beautiful woman that we're so used to, that we're used to seeing on screen. So we don't quite understand why she's being picked on.
Mm. So to bring it back around, for the I wrote about this film in our Brat collection, which available now.
Woohoo!
And we chose to pair the film with the song Sympathy is a Knife. My yes, shout out to my friend Isabel for suggesting that to me. I think I wanted to ask whether people thought, basically, well, first of all, did people think that was a good pairing, and also if you have any thoughts about how that the concept of sympathy being a knife, sympathy being a weapon, ties into the film.
Obviously, when I was editing your notes, I hadn't seen this film. So I was reading your notes and you mentioned in there that, I forget what the character's name is, the one girl who does provide that sympathy to Carrie by telling her boyfriend to ask Carrie out. And of course, you're watching the movie and you're kind of like, is she doing this out of malice? Like, what's the objective here? Why is she asking Tommy to ask her out? Is she feeding into this thing that the other mean girl's already planning? Is it part of the plan? And I thought that you had a really interesting perspective there of, had she not been sympathetic towards Carrie, had she not asked Tommy to ask her to the prom, this ultimate final push of what finally pushed Carrie to the edge wouldn't have happened. She wouldn't have gone to the prom. She wouldn't have had the pig's blood thrown on her. She wouldn't have been ultimately embarrassed. And I guess in the context of the story, she wouldn't have killed all these people. um, but so it does. It was a really interesting choice because "Sympathy is a Knife" is a beloved song by the people, and so we had to pick something that was a good fit. And I think that you really picked a good justification for that. Of that is what ultimately pushes to the conclusion of, because she's being sympathetic, she wants to be nice to Carrie. Finally, someone is being nice, but that niceness ultimately ends in the demise of Carrie's whole, I mean, ultimately her demise, because she dies at the end. Spoilers.
I I'll one thing I always think about, and this kind of goes outside the canon of the film, but I always think about how, because in the movie she ends up going to prom with, I think Tommy's his name, who is the boyfriend of Sue, the girl who's trying to be nice to her, and she convinces him to go with Carrie as kind of a nice gesture, and he goes and he's like, yeah, I'm not going with Sue. Do you want to go with me? It's fine. It's all. Um, he never explicitly says to her at any point, I'm still with Sue. We're just doing this to like because obviously that would be a mean thing to do. But I could never escape the question of, what if she hadn't gone crazy? What if that pig's blood hadn't fallen on her? What if everything had gone nice? And then the next day at school, she runs up to Tommy and gives him a big hug and tries to give him a smooch, because they were getting very flirtatious and romantic at that night. And again, she has no reason to believe that his motives were ulterior in any way. That she just believes he genuinely likes her. And then he would have had to have been like, sorry, Carrie, it was fun last night, but I'm still dating Sue, and this was just a favor for her. That would have been, she would have blown up the school anyway. Like, that would have been just as, and I know,
I agree.
yeah. And I know that's not within the text of the film, but I think that, I mean, from my perspective, ultimately, the sympathy that Sue shows, it's a well-meaning gesture, but I really couldn't see a way that would end well, regardless of what actually happened there.
It would have just added one more layer of bullying and trauma, and then it would have happened the next day any which ways. So
absolutely. I guess my last question that I have is, so this is a Stephen King book, as mentioned before. This is actually his first book. It's also the first film adaptation of one of his books. So unlike the million that we've had now, there wasn't really a blueprint for this. I was just curious if anyone had any thoughts about how it compares, in your eyes, to other Stephen King's adaptations, like The Shining or It. I don't know if you guys have seen those ones. You're not really horror fans, self-admitted. But yeah, it's but yeah, I was just wondering.
No, I've seen the Shining. I think this, obviously, because it's a Kubrick film, it's effective in its horror just because it's the director of it. I was actually really surprised when I learned that it was the first Stephen King, because obviously Stephen King is Stephen King, and that's we know of him and all of his movie adaptations now. So I was surprised to learn that Carrie was the first one. Did you say it was his first book too?
Yes, it was. He wrote it out and he threw it away. He was like, it's not good enough, and his wife rescued it from the bin and was like, just send it out anyway to publishers, see what they say, and that launched his career. This is pre cocaine addiction, pre being hit by a truck. Stephen King, just OG.
I'm actually, what I've been thinking about throughout this is, I'm surprised that a film about or a story about periods, about women going from girls to becoming women, that sort of, whatever, is such a beloved story, because no one talks about periods, right? That's not something you talk about. You're like, ew, gross, periods. So I'm just like, to me, from a cultural perspective, it's really interesting that this is the story that it's so ingrained in our culture. We're so used to seeing that image of Carrie being splashed with the pig's blood. And everyone knows that Carrie's a story about, she gets her period. Um, but also it also kind of in my head, it's making me think about villainizing. I think the film does the same thing that the mother is, chastising Carrie for. You're a villain because you've gotten your period now. But the film or the story in the same way is positioning Carrie because she just got her period. Now she's the devil. Like, so it's just like it's still chastising periods. It's still like making periods a scary thing. Like when women get their period, they become insane. And it's feeding into that cultural narrative of women are so erratic when they're on their period. It's just like they have no control of their emotions. They're gonna blow up the school. So it's like I don't know. I think it's interesting that it's a story about womanhood, but it's a story still at the end of the day, it's a story about womanhood told by men, written by a man, directed by a man. I don't know who directed the new adaptation, if it's a man or a woman. So it looks like it's a woman. So I don't know, maybe Ishnor, did you feel the same way about the
Y-
the remake because
Yeah,
it is written by or directed by a woman?
yeah, because for me, what happened with this film was that, like, I agree with your point, because the moment she has her period, like, and she gets these powers, and how she's using these powers, they're not coming from any sort of intention, but they're coming from an emotional pain of going through something. So it's not like that she wants to use those powers. That's the impression I got, but it is coming from
Mm.
deep emotional pain, and that is how she's using those powers. So it really ties into the fact that, are we villainizing women again? Are we like talking about that? Oh, uh, is it your time of, like? Are we like
Yeah, your time of the month.
feeding? Is it your time of the month? Are we feeding into those narratives? Are we equating that with this? So this is where I feel a bit uncomfortable
Hmm.
Mm.
as well, because like getting the powers, getting the period, blowing the school away, and using the powers which is coming from an emotional pain, and like you've not even like practiced the powers. I'm sorry, like people practice powers, right? They do small things first. So she has
You
done the
have to
smaller thing of
control your
like the,
emotions.
you have to control. So what happens is, like, there are books which float one day, and the mirror breaks one day, and she realizes she has power, and the next day the school blows away and the people are killed. So I'm like, when did you get the time? Like, how are you dealing? Like, so this is where my discomfort comes from.
I
Yeah.
will say that was such a funny scene when she's like walking. She's just like walking away on this road, and then the
Yes.
mean girl comes with John Travolta, and the car just like flips over, and she's just standing there covered in blood with her big crazy doe eyes, and she's like, "Oh!" That was so funny. I
Yeah.
I laughed out loud. Like, what? That was
So
goofy,
good,
but
man.
yeah, I don't know. We can't give women can't be the president of the United States because they're gonna press the detonation bomb when they're on their period, even though we got a crazy fucking lunatic in charge now who's gonna press the
Yeah.
detonation bomb whenever too. He doesn't have
There has to be
instincts.
more
He's just crazy.
education. Yeah, there has to be more education around periods. There has to be more education and more understanding of what a PMS is, what a period is, what exactly happens, like in a scientific manner, please. so
I mean,
so we understand these narratives more.
it sounds like from what you're saying that the beats in this remake are pretty much the same as the original.
Yeah.
So I mean that
Yeah.
I'm a bit perplexed as to why, a woman took on this film and, took on a remake of it when she had the, ability to better explore this idea of periods and this sort of power that Carrie has, but it sounds like it's just exactly beat by beat the same thing, as most remakes are. Same thing as
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I found quite striking about this discussion, is because with the 76 version, I forgot when it came out now, you can plausibly understand someone reaching that age without having learned what a period is, particularly in that environment she was in, and the lack of discussion, the lack of education, and the reaction from all the other girls mocking her. Whereas in 2013, in a post-internet age, that seems like a far more hard to kind of accept concept. Like not an impossibility at all, but like it's much less of a given than it would have been back then. And so to open the film kind of in the same way seems fairly odd. It seems like something that they'd want to update, but it sounds like they might maybe haven't.
I think just adding the layer of like social media and like cyberbullying and everything, that's what they did in the 2013 film. But I do agree with you, like with the
2013 one is set in present day.
Yeah, because there is internet.
Oh, okay.
There is internet, and they're making videos, and there is cyberbullying. There's a video which goes up. So, and it's a modern school where she's going. Everybody's swimming. They have a good swim instructor. Like, what's happening to the education over there? Like, you taught these things in school.
If you can afford a swim instructor on your staff, you can afford like sex ed.
I will say, I grew up in, at the time, to put it in perspective, today, the town where I grew up is very Trump, very conservative, very MAGA heavy. I don't think it was really like that when I was growing up, but that's the way that it has evolved now. And I will say, we did have sex education in school, but we didn't have it until I think maybe my junior year of high school, like actual like sex ed. And then I remember like in middle school, like the period conversation was like one day and it was a video that you just watched, and like like they don't really explain to you like what it is. Like they split the boys and the girls up. The boys go learn about erections and the girls learn about their life ending, about if you get pregnant you're gonna die. So I will say that there's still like, even if this new version of Carrie is set in the present day, I can understand why it's still like confusing as why they don't understand it, because it's like you still really aren't taught anything about it. Like, when I got my period, maybe this is TMI, but I was just like, what the fuck? I was exactly like Carrie. I was like, I don't know what's like, okay, like whatever. Like, I was like, what is this? Like, ew. I was like, ew, oh my God.
I thought I was gonna die and I would need a surgery. Like I've done something wrong.
You really don't like. I guess Carrie's reaction really isn't that dramatic, because you're like, why the fuck am I bleeding? Like, what is this? Even though I will say, with the first time you get your period, I mean, it's like old blood, right? So it's like, it's not dripping down your leg, like so dramatic like that. Like, it's just like clumps of like blood coming out. It's like gross. TMI, but you know what? We here at Filmies are about breaking boundaries. Okay, we're breaking barriers. Yes. We're talking about periods.
Yes, we are. But also, like when I got my first period, I was in shock. But then I was also like, and then it struck me after like a minute or two. Is like, okay, this is what is happening with me. So I had that background knowledge as well, and that happened from family members and friends and school and everything. So that sort of prepared me mentally. But for 1 or 2 minutes, I was like, okay, I'm gonna die. I've done something wrong. This is my punishment. So something like that happened. And it was like, oh no.
And it's also like, why the fuck is Carrie just getting her period in high school? Like, I got my period in elementary school. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's something extremely wrong with this girl. Like, why is she getting her period in high school? Like, what? Maybe that's why they should be picking on her. She needs to go to a doctor like right away. Like, she's so anemic. Like, what?
Maybe that.
Well, when I have my first period, I'll be sure to report it in the next Filmeast episode. So stay tuned for that.
Please do.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Carrie. If you're interested in exploring the 17 other films and TV shows featured in our Brat curated collection, make sure you get your copy of the zine at film-east.com. Again, the zine costs £1.99 or $2.50 for a digital download. And for a limited time, you can get a print copy of the collection for £6.50 or $9. To learn more about Film East and our upcoming events, film criticism publications and unique activities, visit our website film-east.com or follow us on any of our social media at films_east. Make sure you're subscribed to Film East Chats anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Music, Spotify and YouTube, so you never miss one of our deep dives into films and TV shows. Again, we're Film East, a global film organisation.